Well, hello everybody. I want to start off, before we get into the actual text of chapter 18, I want to read from a report, because lest anyone think I was too harsh on the Vatican last week, equating them with the harlot of chapter 17, I do want to give a little bit of support for that. I'm going to read to you from a report that comes from the Vatican. It's actually a report called the Pontifical Council for Justice and Peace. That's the name of the council, the body, Vatican group that this report comes from. Now, the report itself is written to the United Nations, I believe, or maybe the European Union. And it's kind of written in diplo speak, because it's diplomatic language. What I did was I went in and I distilled as much as I could to get the salient points from this report. I think I did a pretty accurate job in outlining what the report actually says. And I want to read it to you because it really gives us a window into where all of this is going. It also gives us a little barometer of how close we might be to the end. And I just want you to listen to this report. It's a little lengthy, but I tried to make it as clear as possible. It is called the Pontifical Council for Justice and Peace Towards Reforming the International Financial and Monetary Systems in the Context of Global Public Authority. That's a little ominous. Here's what the report says. Because of its long experience in human affairs, it is the Church's responsibility to help straighten out the financial mess the world has gotten into. Okay. Since both the Church and government exist to ensure the common good and promote the value of human dignity, it is important that they work together to realize these goals. This is the best avenue to make people responsible and free to excel. This is needed because the world is going through a crisis that everyone needs to help solve, both public and private, and to examine together the cultural and moral values that unite all of us. To help solve this crisis, the Vatican is committed to helping rethink and replan a new vision for the future. The Vatican wants to help government leaders straighten out the situation so the poor don't continue to suffer at the hand of greedy materialists. The Vatican proposes to accomplish this through the establishment of a global public authority to reform the financial and monetary systems of the world. It is God's will that we do this because the problems facing the global economies are rooted in both financial and moral breakdowns that affect everyone. Pope Paul determined correctly that it is not moral to have economic winners and losers, since most of the losers are poor countries. Therefore, a new approach to governing global finances is needed so this doesn't happen again. True peace can only be achieved through global prosperity that reaches everyone, not just a select few. The root of the problem is that the world financial system is currently governed by market forces. This needs to change. A better approach is for global financial and monetary systems to be centrally controlled by smart people, not by market forces, which don't result in fair wealth distribution. While capitalism does promote individual prosperity, it does not serve the common good, because capitalism results in an unfair distribution of wealth. The Vatican sees this as a moral problem and not just an economic and financial one. It is sinful to promote individual prosperity which benefits some and not be concerned about the inequality this produces. To fix this problem requires an ethics-based economy that is people-centered, not just money-centered or individual-centered. Communism was on the right track, but failed to provide what it promised. But a capitalist system in which in many ways is a form of idolatry is just as bad. The Vatican was way ahead of the curve on a solution to cure the current injustice of the global economic and financial system. Pope John taught that to secure the common good and provide ethical control over these systems, a world political authority needed to be set up to provide a morality-based system of rules and controls. This world political authority would bridge the gap between current political organizations and the human community they serve. As Pope Benedict also astutely foresaw, the creation of a world political authority to oversee all these global systems is the only real solution to all the problems the world is facing today. Most of the world's turmoil is based on an unjust global economic system that needs fixing. Only a world governing authority that is rooted in a moral recognition of the common good can fix it. But to be successful, a world global authority needs the power to enforce its rules and controls on the rest of the world so the rich nations don't continue to oppress the poor ones. In order to accomplish this, more powerful countries will need to relinquish their positions of power and negotiate with weaker nations on the basis of equality to achieve a solution that is fair to everyone and promotes the common good. To be truly effective, this world governing authority should have jurisdiction over both public and private institutions, including monetary and financial institutions. The world governing body must be benevolent, not tyrannical, only stepping in to help if the world's individual, social, financial, and monetary systems already in place are deficient in producing benefits for the common good. And a global governance must involve many layers of control so the world won't fall back into its old bad habits. It must have the power and reach to hold everyone accountable for the good of all. The biggest challenge facing this new global authority will be setting up rules and controls that effectively redistribute the world's wealth for the common good. In order to accomplish this, the current global system will need to be scrapped. And a new set of rules will need to be adopted that are fairer for everyone. But the most important aspect of this global transformation must be the consideration of the spiritual, moral, and ethical needs of the world. These are the most important elements for the achievement of the common good. These needs are even more important than the economic and financial considerations of a new global authority in achieving universal brotherhood. Indoctrination should begin right away in our educational institutions so that future leaders can be educated to discern responsibilities of leadership that promote the public good rather than personal enrichment. Media and all those in positions of influence should help to enlighten world public opinion as well. This is not an easy path to a more just future, but we should never give up the task of making the world a more fair and just community. As always, the church, and their Catholic Church, will have a large part to play in seeing this reality come into existence by guiding people towards this new future. The world has grown too big for small thinking. A larger, more cooperative and competent way of thinking is on the horizon, focused on the common good. The future of humanity depends on it, and the church has the obligation to lead the way because it is God's will that we do this. That is pretty darn scary.
Read right into what we were talking about last week.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like it comes right out of Revelation chapter 17. Some might say, well, that's just, a little group somewhere off in the Vatican, dusty closet that comes up with this stuff, bunch of communists or whatever, and no one's going to pay attention to it. Oh, contraire, mon frère. Check it out. NBC News, Dateline December 8th. Big business gets its wings as leaders from major U.S. companies partner with Pope Francis. Well, what's this all about? Well, it's just what we read. Capitalism met Catholicism on Tuesday as some of the world's business, and investment leaders announced a new partnership with Pope Francis. The Pope means business. Capitalism met Catholicism on Tuesday as some of the world's biggest business leaders announced a new partnership with Pope Francis. The alliance known as the Council for Inclusive Capitalism with the Vatican aims to create a more inclusive, fair, and sustainable economic landscape by taking pledges towards sustainable development goals focused on areas such as climate action, peace and justice, quality education, and gender equality, and an economic system that is fair, trustworthy, capable of addressing the most profound challenges facing humanity and our planet is urgently needed, Pope Francis said in a statement. Now, where did we just hear that? Came right out of that report. You see, the world is falling right in line. And it sounds to me like the Vatican is applying for the job to be the moral caretaker for the new world order, because it has to be spiritual. And the rest of the world is falling right in line. So it seems to me like it's not that far off where we're going to see some major changes We're already seeing some of them. I was looking at some of the reports from the business world, and what they're doing now is they're canceling, like banks are canceling loans to organizations that don't fall in line with this type of thinking. Businesses now are stepping up and saying, well, we're going to change our business so that it's more sustainable, more people friendly, more spiritually and morally based, blah, 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 blah. And it's all coming right out of the Vatican, in part. Coming out of the Vatican. Not all, but in part it's coming out of the Vatican. So I don't think I was too harsh. I do think that what we're seeing is Revelation 17 just starting to unfold before us. Well, we're in Revelation 18, which is going to be the judgment of the great harlot described. So now we're going to look at the judgment of the false religious system, the great harlot. Notice what it says. Let's get into my thing. In verse 1 and 2. After these things I saw another angel come down from heaven, having great power, and the earth was lighted with his glory. And he cried mightily with a strong voice, saying, He cried mightily with a strong voice, saying, and he cried mightily with a loud voice, saying, okay, I repeated myself. Babylon the great is fallen, and has become a dwelling place of demons, a prison for every foul spirit, and a cage for every unclean and hated bird. Okay, so these first two verses are a declaration from God regarding the judgment that's going to come upon false religion, as it is in its last form during the tribulation period. False religion has existed since the Tower of Babel. In fact, before that, people worshipped the sun and moon and stars, but it wasn't organized like it was in Babylon. Remember, we talked about how Babylon brought everybody together into a system of false religion, and that false religion perpetuated in other cultures and other nations around the world. It is in full bloom today. And we saw that is actually the Catholic Church, which brings a lot of the idolatry of Babylon to the modern world. A lot of the idolatry of Babylon is found in the Catholic Church. It's found in other false religions as well. But no other system has perfected that system the way the Catholic Church has. For 2,000 years, they ruled the world. And they did it by subjecting people to their doctrine under fear of death. They would then become part of the system that they devised, where they were the gateway to heaven. Well, God's going to judge all that. He's going to bring it to an end finally. He says so right here. Now, he says it's Babylon because of the fact that the great harlot is associated with the idolatry of Babylon. It perpetuates the idolatry of Babylon. But notice this angel. He's pretty cool. He comes down from heaven, and I can just imagine him coming through the sky, not our sky, but coming through the universe, the heavens. And as he gets closer to the earth just starts glowing, from the power of this angel. This is like a mighty angel. It's coming down to pronounce the great judgment upon false religion. Notice the three things that God says about the character of this harlot. Notice what he says here. He says it has become a dwelling place of demons, a prison for every foul spirit, and a cage for every unclean and hated bird. Okay, so what is it that God finds particularly appalling about this false religious system called the great harlot, Babylon the Great? The three things that are mentioned here. First one is dwelling place of demons, right? This isn't a religious, God-fearing system. This is a demonic, satanic system that is being described here. Even though it's clothed in religious symbolism and pretends to be an organization that supports and promotes Christ, it's not. It is a demonic system. and it's a prison for every foul spirit. Now that's an interesting phrase. It's a prison. Why do you think he calls it a prison? Seems like something's caged there, right? Seems like something can't get out. Almost seems like that the demons that are part of this, these evil spirits that are involved with this organization, they've got nowhere else to go. This is their home. This is their place.
It seems like he's got them all in one place.
Kind of got them sequestered, right? I think it shows the absolute satanic nature of this organization. This is not a nice organization. And notice it says it's a cage for every unclean and hated bird. Why the reference to birds here? Anybody have any idea why there's a reference to the birds here? What's the deal with birds? You know, in the parables, Jesus gave a parable about the mustard seed. He said, the kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed. And you plant it in the soil. You know, mustard seed's almost microscopic. You barely could see it. But he says it grows into the biggest tree you ever saw. Massive tree. But then something comes and lodges in the tree. Remember what he said comes and lives in the tree? A bunch of birds. A bunch of birds come and live in the tree. And people that read that parable are like, oh, how nice. The tree's a nice home for all the birds and everything. It's sweet, right? No, it's not sweet. What Jesus was saying there is that the tree represents the kingdom of God, and all of these foul birds, they come and infiltrate it, and they pollute it, and they bring in false doctrine, they bring in heresy. And the nature of the church, the organized church, the face of the church on the world, is going to be, yes, it's going to grow into a massive kingdom. You know, today Christians make up billions of people on the earth. But there's so much evil that is in the church, in the organized church, and especially in this harlot, that every foul spirit and every unclean and hated bird finds a home in this church. It is, without a doubt, one of the ugliest, scariest pictures of an organization that you would think is not that bad. Vern.
After the rapture, the believers are going to be out of it.
They are. We're going to be gone.
Well, and out of the Catholic Church.
And out of the Catholic Church too.
And so,
It's only going to be loud. What's going to be left? Just the evil ones. Just the evil ones. So it's significant what God is saying about these harlots. So why is God judging this harlot? Well, that's one of the reasons, because it's full of demons. But here's another one. He judges it because of her flagrant commercialism. For all the nations have drunk of the wine of the wrath of her fornication, and the kings of the earth have committed fornication with her, and the merchants of the earth have become rich through the abundance of her luxury. How do merchants get rich from a religious system? You ever think about that? If this is truly a false religious system, which I believe it is, how does the merchants get rich? Yeah, interestingly enough, the Vatican is the 15th largest economy in the world. Did you know that? It is a huge business enterprise. Huge. They bring in great amounts of money. They are invested in great amounts of business around the world. They are seen as the gateway to the European Union. If you want to get anywhere in the European Union commercially, you better court the favor of the Vatican, because the Vatican has the ear of a lot of the European Union leaders. The Vatican's currency is the euro. They bring in over $500 million every year in just souvenirs and trinkets and tourism that comes to the Vatican. That's just in people buying stuff, you know, going on tours, all of that. They are vastly, vastly rich. And in this day that's coming, in the tribulation period, based on what I just read to you, how the Catholic Church is in the forefront of pushing for a more just and spiritual economic system, they're going to be right where they need to be the ones to pull the strings and call the shots, just like they did for 2,000 years. Nothing really has changed. You see, since 1858 till the present, the Catholic Church lost a lot of its power and clout. It is now gaining it back. It was Napoleon, actually, who pulled the plug on the Catholic Church in Europe. But it has been slowly gaining since then. Notice what else it's judged for. It's judged for her flaunting arrogance. And I heard another voice from heaven saying, "Come out of her, my people, lest you share in her sins, lest you receive of her plagues, for her sins have reached to heaven, and God has remembered her iniquities. Render to her just as she rendered to you, and repay her double according to her works. In the cup which she has mixed, mix double for her. In the measure that she glorified herself and lived luxuriously, in the same measure give her torment and sorrow. For she says in her heart, I sit as a queen. I am no widow. I will not see sorrow." It's interesting that this attitude of this harlot, this false religious system that will ride in on the back of the Antichrist, is one of complete and total arrogance. It is absolutely the queen of the world. Remember that coin? And the front part of the coin was a picture of Pope Leo or Pope Pius. I think it was Pope Leo. It was a pope. Then on the back was a woman, and she's sitting on the earth, and she's holding a cup. And the inscription underneath her is that she sits on the world. She rules the world, basically, is what that coin says. She rules the world. That's going to be the attitude of this harlot. Nothing can touch her. Nothing's going to stop her. Nothing is going to get in her way. The attitude of the Catholic Church is nothing can stop her because it's God's will for the Catholic Church to rule the world. So here's the true nature of the harlot that God hates. It's the arrogance of pride that was first demonstrated by Satan and now has found residence in this false religious system. He's going to judge it. He's going to judge it. Notice what I found a book. It's a very interesting book written in the 1800s. And it was a history of the Catholic Church. But notice what it says. This is a pro-Catholic book. But the third and crowning triumph of the Holy See was reserved for the 13th century in the foundation of the two great orders of ecclesiastical knighthood, the all-powerful, all-pervading Dominicans and Franciscans. The religious fervor of the Middle Ages culminated in the overthrow of the only power which could pretend to vie with her in antiquity, in sanctity, in universality. The papacy saw itself exalted to rule alone over the kings of the earth. That's how they see themselves. That's how the harlot's going to see themselves. That's exactly the kind of pride and arrogance that God hates. Notice what it says in verse 8. Therefore her plagues will come in one day. In one day. And I believe this is literally in one day. Death, mourning, famine. And she will be utterly burned with fire, for the strong is the Lord who judges her. Now this day that comes to destroy the harlot is a day that is brought on by the Antichrist. Remember we saw earlier, he's the one that's going to execute the judgment against the harlot. God is going to use the false prophet to execute judgment. And how does he intend to judge the great harlot? What's he going to do here? Well, we already mentioned it. In one day, something momentous is going to happen. What is going to happen? She will be utterly burned with fire. Now, what's that?
So the great angel's going to come down. The great angel's going to come down.
Maybe, except it's the Antichrist who does this. The Antichrist who executes this judgment. Now, when John wrote this, there wasn't a power powerful enough to destroy something like a city with fire. Just couldn't do it in one day. Can we do that today? We certainly can do it today. Very easily. Called a nuclear explosion. How long does it take to execute this judgment? One day. One bomb. One judgment. But notice what it says. People aren't going to be happy about this. They're not going to be happy about, the people on the earth are not going to be happy about the destruction of this great harlot. The kings of the earth who committed fornication and lived luxuriously with her will weep and lament for her when they see the smoke of her burning, standing at a distance for fear of her torment, saying, Alas, alas, that great city Babylon, that mighty city, for in 1 hour your judgment has come. So the merchants of the world who have been doing business with this great harlot, and I do believe it is Rome, I believe it will rise to become the economic hub and center of the kingdom of Antichrist. They're going to be standing afar off. They're going to be seeing this. If you are in Italy, pretty much anywhere in the middle section of Italy, you can see stuff happening, not in Rome, but if there was a nuclear explosion, you'd be able to see it very far off. And apparently they're standing back and they're seeing this great city, this mighty city. What mighty city? The one that's in Rome. That's where it is. It's a mighty city in Rome. It is destroyed in 1 hour. And they are distraught over her. Why are they standing off at a distance? For fear. It says they lament when they see the smoke, standing a distance for fear of her torment. Why would they be afraid? Why wouldn't they rush in and help? Save people. Well, if it was a nuclear explosion, you wouldn't be rushing in, would you? You wouldn't be anywhere near it. It's called radiation. And I would think that that would be a plausible explanation as to why they're not running in there. And notice who else is upset. Not only the kings of the earth. Now, why would the kings of the earth be upset? Who are the kings of the earth? Like government officials, right? Politicians. People who make their money fleecing the public. They get their cut, right? They get the taxes. They get all of this pleasure and they get all of this recognition for being the ones that run stuff. Well, they're going to be really upset because their power base has been destroyed. But notice who else is being affected by this. The merchants of the earth will weep and mourn over her, for no one buys their merchandise anymore. I was reading an article about how important the Vatican is for the European Union. Extremely important. Everything that goes on in the European Union, pretty much everything that goes on in the European Union gets run by the Vatican before any decisions are made. And if the Vatican doesn't like it, they'll let you know. And there have been many, many changes in European policy because the Vatican didn't like it. They are the gateway to the European Union. But when they're gone, no one buys the merchandise of gold. And you can read all of the things that are listed here. Just about every commodity and service that is imaginable here, including the bodies and souls of men. They control people and they control things. The fruit that your soul longed for has gone from you, and all the things which are rich and splendid are gone from you. You shall find them no more. When the Antichrist destroys the harlot, he's not only going to destroy a false religious system, he's going to destroy an economic system that has been prosperous for many, many people. And he is going to demand that all the world worship him. It doesn't matter to him if the world goes into chaos and utter destruction. What's his purpose? All the world worship him. That's what he wants. And his whole point is destruction. Because what's Satan's motive? What's Satan's goal? Kill, steal, destroy. And the Antichrist is Satan-controlled, Satan-possessed, along with the false prophet that we saw earlier. Now this merchants of the earth, they weep and mourn. And so together with the kings of the earth, we see this tremendous lament over the destruction of the harlot because of all of the benefit that they brought to them. It's always been true of false religion. It's always been true that false religion is a means for worldly wealth. It has been used that way. The purpose is to oppress and subjugate people and bring them under control, because if you fear that you're going to go to hell unless you go to this organization, that's a huge power pull on people. And that's how false religion throughout history has kept people under control. And it is a means to worldly wealth. You know, Acts 19 is a good example. Acts 19. In fact, let's take a look at it. Acts 19, 24 through 27. You look at it. Paul in Ephesus. And there was a certain man named Demetrius, a silversmith, who made silver shrines of Diana. Diana was a little idol that they had. In fact, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world was the temple of Diana in Ephesus. They used to say that this temple, this image fell from heaven. And so people would come and worship this idol of Diana. And this craftsman would make little things and sell them, right? Make some pretty good money. Look what it says. It brought no small profit to the craftsman. This is false religion making people rich. And he called all of the workers together who had the similar situation, and he said, "Man, you know that we have our prosperity by this trade. False religion making us rich. Moreover, you see and hear that not only at Ephesus, but throughout all of Asia, Paul has persuaded many to turn away, saying there are not gods which are made with hands. So not only is this trade of ours in danger of falling into disrepute, but also the temple of the great goddess Diana may be despised and her magnificence destroyed, and whom all Asia and the world worship." In other words, he's killing our livelihood, this Paul. He's turning everybody away from worshiping idols. We're going to lose our finances. It's nothing new, right? Nothing new. Same thing. Same thing, kings of the earth. But in the future, it won't be trinkets that are at stake, but vast wealth of all kinds. We saw that list. Including what God hates the most. They lead astray people's souls. Jesus said you can't serve God and mammon, but apparently the harlot will believe you can. But notice something even more sinister. It's not just the fact that people go visit the Vatican. There's some cool stuff there. I mean, you got to admit, the Sistine Chapel, I mean, come on. Look at Michelangelo's work on the walls. That's pretty impressive, right? Okay, so I don't fault anybody for going to the Vatican and looking at this stuff. It's pretty impressive. But where it gets really sinister is things like this. Council for Inclusive Capitalism. Now here we are again. This is a spin-off of that report, that emphasis, that spirituality coming in, working together to change capitalism for good. Oh, isn't that marvelous? Now, you've got the Pope here. You've got a lot of good business leaders here. And what are they doing? Their mission is to harness the private sector to create a more inclusive, sustainable, and trusted economic system. The movement. Oh, that's just a fringe group, right? Just a few people standing there. Nope. Their members, 10 trillion in assets, 2.1 trillion market capitalization, 200 million workers, in 163 countries. I think that this whole harlot thing is well on its way. You ask me. And what's exciting is that we're really close. I mean, to see this come to pass means we're really near the end. We're getting there. We're getting there. It's right around the corner, which is kind of exciting. We live in a very, very exciting time. Now notice the merchants of these things who became rich by her will stand at a distance again for fear of her torment, weeping and wailing. Alas, that great city was clothed in fine linen, purple, scarlet, adorned with gold, precious stones, and pearls. For in 1 hour riches came to nothing. They stand off crying when they see the smoke of her burning, saying, "What is like this great city?" They threw dust on their heads, cried out, weeping, wailing, Alas, alas, that great city, in which all who had ships on the sea became rich by her wealth, for in 1 hour she is made desolate. And so you get a picture, you get a feeling of what the world is going through when this happens. But what a contrast to what's going on in heaven. Notice what's going on in heaven. They're rejoicing. What a contrast. Down on earth, they're wailing, and in heaven, they're like praising God. Rejoice over her, O heaven, and you holy apostles and prophets, for God has avenged you on her. You know, it's very easy to get caught up in the way the world thinks about things, caught up in the way the world sees things, caught up in the way the world's attitudes shape how our attitudes, you know. It's always refreshing when we get a chance to see the side from God's point of view, because that's really the one that counts, right? Notice he says, Then a mighty angel took up a stone like a great millstone, threw it into the sea, saying, Thus with violence the great city Babylon shall be thrown down, shall not be found any more. The sound of harpists, musicians, flutists, trumpeters shall not be heard in you any more. No craftsman of any craft shall be found in you any more. The sound of a millstone shall not be heard in you. The light of a lamp shall not shine in you. The voice of the bridegroom and the bride shall not be heard in you. For your merchants were the great men of the earth, but by your sorcery all the nations were deceived, and in her was found the blood of prophets and saints and all who were slain on the earth. And again, that is a fall back to what we saw in verse 17. The great harlot was responsible for great persecution of God's people. So, tremendous passage of judgment.